And welcome back into the room. It's been great to have, it's been really terrific to have a morning session that's been dedicated to innovation. We are continuing to focus as an industry on innovation in storytelling techniques, which we're going to hear more about in just a second. It was great to hear innovation from our friends at Degero and Getty on how do we move product and get it onto our screens faster. And I'm very pleased that at Global News, we've recently come up with innovation in the sales space where we've actually managed to produce some research that shows, I think you'll all be very pleased to hear, that shows our clients that ads placed in news actually get far more attention than ads placed in other types of television programming. So if we continue to push the envelope as an industry, I think we can continue to find new ways to tell our stories and monetize them, which is so important to everyone. I think most people in the room know me, but for those who don't, my name is Troy Reeb. It's been my honor to be the head of Global News since 2008, the longest 28 years of my life. Yesterday at this time, we were engaged in a discussion on what media consumption might look like 10 years from now, and it's almost hard to believe Facebook was only created in 2004, Twitter in 2006, Degero didn't start until 2008, Sun News didn't go on the air until 2011, then off the air in 2015. 10 years ago, Netflix was a big thing. In fact, in 2008, it celebrated the delivery of its 1 billionth DVD snail-mailed to people's homes. Streaming Netflix didn't really get started until 2012. So, things are changing fast, and it's almost impossible to predict how audiences will be consuming news in the future. What we do know is that the demand for content just keeps growing, and that to succeed as news organizations, we need to be sure that our content is digital ready for distribution by whatever form comes along next. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you someone who is working to prepare the next generation of journalists and storytellers for this multi-platform world. Kris Hodgson is not just an instructor in the Digital Communications and Media program at Lethbridge College. He is also the acting chair, and Lethbridge happens to so be my alma mater. Kris has been a writer and a photographer for various publications across Western Canada for many years. Last year, he completed his master's degree with the U of A in Edmonton in the field of virtual reality and 360-degree journalism. And this past fall, at Lethbridge College, he launched a new applied research program in these very areas, VR and 360 journalism. I happen to remain fairly active with the college, and Kris will know very well that over the years I would often say that journalism graduates need to be better prepared to file not just for TV or print or radio, but for all platforms. Well, as of this year, students in Lethbridge's DCM program are creating content for not 2 or 3, but 5 platforms: online, print, radio, television, and 360. Global News has been pleased to support Lethbridge College in this pioneering research, and here to tell us a little bit more about it and whether it might have some practical application for all of us one day is Kris Hodgson. Kris.
All right, thank you very much for that introduction, Troy. So I'm going to boil journalism down to 3 significant historical moments. 1960, Nixon and Kennedy, the first televised debate, and how that shaped discourse. And then you had the Telegraph, which went online for the first time in '94 with their first website. And then in 2015, Google distributed 1 million Google Cardboard headsets to its subscribers to look at this next era of storytelling. And if you haven't seen the New York Times app or their website, they have the Daily 360 where they're going out creating content in a 360-degree space. So pretty exciting. And so that was a lot of inspiration for why I decided to put my master's in a certain direction. You have New York Times, CNN, and Vice News. They're starting to do this. And CNN and New York Times on a substantial basis, Vice kind of dabbling in it. And last year I was in Banff at a conference and I met the head of editorial content. And he said when they first started shooting their first 360 video, they just strapped 2 GoPros together with duct tape. And that was their first version. So things have evolved, and they've evolved very quickly in the last 2 years. And that's why at Lethbridge College we wanted to really adopt that. So last July, I was very happy to finish my master's in virtual reality journalism, and I went to Europe for 3 weeks to celebrate because it was a long 2 years while I was working full-time teaching at Lethbridge College. So very exciting program at the U of A, and I was inspired by a certain marketing rep from ATB who was passing around these Google Cardboard headsets at a conference. And I was like, I got to get a hold of that. So it led us to applied research at Lethbridge College, and I received some funding this past year, and we'll wrap it up by July. So there's still some things I'm tying up here, so I'll report on as much as I've kind of gathered over the last year to explore this further. And it's been very successful. A lot of stumbling blocks, obviously, with new technology or bleeding edge, but that's what we've been up to. So this is a very busy slide, I apologize. So our 2-year program in digital communications and media, we're cranking out content, like Troy said, on 5 different platforms. So we have Lethbridge Campus Media.ca. We're kind of digital first, pushing everything through there. We have a radio station. We have the television station. We have our newspaper. It went from 18 issues a year. We're now down to 4. So obviously, things have changed. Things have evolved. We still need the students to do page production. And then we introduced 360 storytelling. So I don't know if you recognize some of these faces for those of you from Alberta, but Pete Gingras used to work for Global. George Glant used to work for Global. And then a keen second-year student, Stephanie Savage, she won Troy's internship last year. I think it's the 13th year in a row that Troy has helped get one of our keen students who supplies the best story every year to come to Global Studios in Toronto and Ottawa for 10 days. And so an incredible opportunity, incredible internship. And so she's been working with me, crunching all the data and doing all the fun spreadsheets and the transcribing of all this data. So it's been a great partnership working with this team. So as Troy mentioned as well, Global has been partnering with us, as well as Mammoth VR is a virtual reality firm out of Calgary, and Matt Wright is the CEO. And what's great about him as well, he's another graduate of our program. So he's been very successful, and he's actually launched a lot of partnerships with agriculture companies to create these immersive experiences. And so we're looking at it both from the journalism perspective, but also from the advertising perspective. So lots of exciting potential. Our friend Marshall McLuhan, medium is a message. It's no truer than now with 360 storytelling. It's just this whole new level. Neil Postman, another one of my favorites, talking about a new medium as an extension or amplification of a previous one, and it's definitely the case when you throw on one of these virtual reality headsets and experience that story when suddenly it's right there in front of you, not even 6 feet away. So I definitely encourage you to check this out. I have 3 different headsets here after my talk. If you want to see the kind of content our students have made, I definitely welcome you to do that. So no matter how sexy the technology is, it doesn't really matter if you don't have strong storytelling, and we should know that. And coming from the print side of things, I definitely know writing is foundational to all of this. So with that, we definitely are encouraging our students to keep that in mind as they really decide what is the right type of story to tell in this format. And some of the things I learned out of my master's, VR, although it's incredibly powerful, again, it's this adoption rate and how to properly use this technology effectively. And because everybody's just starting out and trying to figure this out, it's really figuring out how, once mass adoption becomes a thing, or maybe we just have these headsets implanted in our brains, that it becomes more realistic that journalism is going to take this next leap, and it's going to be more realistic that somebody can do this off the side of their desk when you're cranking out another story. Yeah, may as well get that in 360 as well. So Lethbridge College, obviously, it's all about education and experimenting, and we've set up an innovation lab at the college, and just to look at how we can keep on working with these different issues, and I'll talk about these different considerations for 360 that we've looked at. So immersion is definitely one of the 3 keywords for VR, 360 storytelling. And marketing, they love to lump it all in, and they just call it virtual reality journalism. But virtual reality journalism is a little different because that's an animated or created scene. 360 storytelling is actual footage. And with the new Samsung cameras and some newer 360s, you can actually start streaming 360 live. A duality of presence, another key word. So you're here in this room, but then you put on one of these headsets with some earphones, and then suddenly you're in another place at the same time, and that's very unsettling for some people. And the need to sit down sometimes when you're experiencing these stories is definitely recommended. And maybe in a swivel chair too, because the story is up, down, to the left, and right. It's all around you. So very interesting. And empathy. This is why I love this medium or platform so much. It's because looking at the next level of storytelling, and I'll get to it in a little bit more, but trying to understand global events and have more understanding and empathy for what's going on in the world around us, it really brings that to light. So that's very encouraging. And when I first started my master's, I started looking at post-traumatic stress disorder in virtual reality, and I started looking at empathy, but because I don't have a background in neuroscience or psychology, I focused on what I knew best, and that was storytelling. Noni de la Pena, she's like the godmother of journalism, and she was one of the first who started working in this space. And if you haven't seen her piece, she created an animated one called Hunger in Los Angeles with people standing in a line for the food bank, and somebody collapses, I think they have a stroke, and then you get to interact in that environment and see what that is like. And one of her students, I believe, is the one who created what is now known as the Oculus Rift that Facebook owns. So she's definitely been a pioneer in this field. And it's the ethical considerations. So just like any medium, you think about propaganda in the Second World War, you think about how this could also be used for evil with propaganda, and you put that into a virtual reality headset or some unsettling content. You could be showing the Syrian conflict, but maybe that's not the best thing to do because then you might be suffering from PTSD yourself. So again, the ethical considerations for what you want to do, and we found a lot of the time that it was features that had the best fit for this medium. Kris, if you don't know him, he's created some music videos for some small music bands called Kanye West and U2, and he's done a lot of art projects and things like that, looking at 360, and then he created a virtual reality project with the United Nations called Project Syria. And again, it's talking about changing minds, this empathy piece, and that is what is really exciting to me. And I think the students do. I think they're starting to get that excitement. Dylan Pierce spoke in Banff last year when I was at that conference, and again, talking about this connection to the story that you can never have before. So again, being very connected to this piece, again, so the ethical considerations for what you crank out is very important. What's exciting is that we just held the world's first virtual reality conference in the world at Lethbridge College, of all places, Southern Alberta. Woo! We had, as you can see here, 5 continents, 84 cities, 16 countries represented. So they're all actually in virtual reality from all over the world checking in this full-day conference, the world's first full-day virtual reality conference. So keynote speakers, Alex Katzen from Google, and Kathy, she actually is with HTC Vive, and then Alan Smithson is out of Toronto here with Metaverse. So that was very encouraging to get some really strong speakers. Also, Steve Bambury from Dubai was able to chime in as well. And it's hilarious because they actually created a Lethbridge College branded conference room, kind of like this, but it was tiered. And people are these little floating heads, these little avatars in the room, and they're interacting with one another. And if they have a VR headset, they actually have hands, and you can see them gesturing. And then as well, you can launch confetti when somebody says something exciting. And it was quite interesting. And so Rumi was the platform that did that all for free for us because they were very excited about this work that we're doing. And so we hope that this is kind of the catalyst for some of this work we're doing in the 360 and virtual reality space. So very exciting things going on. So here is a little bit of behind the scenes, if this works. There it is. So last year and this year, and for the past, I think, 10 to 15 years, we've done a mock disaster with 4 different programs at the college, and we hired some University of Lethbridge actors to be very convincing, and I'm glad that there's no audio here because they were screaming bloody murder, and it was very unnerving just as faculty to sit and observe this. So we had criminal justice, paramedics, we had, let's see, who am I forgetting, nursing students, as well as our digital communications and media students, all working together, and you can see we're all hiding here in this room because with 360, there's nowhere to hide. So we're hiding in this little kitchen, trying to stay out of the picture and the frame while we shot this over the course of the day. And we staged it 2 times with 2 different groups of students so that we could really get the right piece. And again, you can watch this mock disaster in 360. So it was very interesting and a very exciting day. And it was all done with, who has an Android in the room? Yeah, Samsung S8 phone connected to one of these cameras, Samsung 360. Runs about $500. The price is coming down every month. And using those, we connected them to a monopod, and away we went. We also used secondary sound, so we had our Zoom H2N recorder underneath on the monopod, just because the sound quality alone with that Samsung 360 was not strong enough. So that was great, and that turned out well. As I mentioned, we all had to hide. And then we held focus groups after we did this mock disaster. And we had focus groups with students, business people, and senior citizens, and two sets of each demographic, and seeing how they experienced the story and what they felt about it. And we did a newspaper story first, then a television story, and then the 360 story. And after each medium, we got them to fill out a survey talking about how much that story meant to them and how much they felt or responded to it. And then after they filled out that written survey, so we had some quantitative data to crunch, we then had a group discussion in the room and just, again, got them to expand on some of the things they had written down about how they felt being in that space, what that was like. And one of the favorite parts of the mock disaster was when we strapped a camera right inside an ambulance. And so they loaded the patient in, and they actually had one of the paramedics hang up an IV bag right next to the camera. And then you look down, and you don't have feet, obviously, when you're in these virtual reality experiences. And you see that patient lying there getting treated by the paramedic. And it's just this kind of godlike feeling that you have, that you're looking down on this person while they're getting treated. And obviously, we're not going to get that kind of footage where inside an ambulance in Alberta, the AHS or Alberta Health Services would freak out. So, but talking about all that potential for different type of content. So again, the methodology, we looked at a print version of the story, and then we looked at a television version of the piece, and then everybody strapped on the headset next. And just what I said. So a survey and then a group discussion. So lots of transcribing. I was very happy that Stephanie decided to take on working with me at the end. I don't know if she was still happy, but it was a lot of fun. So some things that came out of this. So the themes were engagement in the topic, technical issues, connection to the content, distraction, and control. And I'll get through those in a little bit here. And empathy. And let's see if I got another one, storytelling. So 7 different themes, and it was really interesting. That was some of the discussion that we were able to extract from either the written surveys or the focus group discussions. So the material was interesting. It kept me focused, as you can see here with the students, very engaged. They liked it. It dropped off as the demographics got older. In this series of graphs coming up, so blue is positive, orange is negative. So hopefully that makes sense. When it came to technical issues, so trying to figure out how to orient yourself in this headset. So what happens is that when you put these on, you have this little mouse trackpad here on the side, and that is like how you get the video to start. You'd think that'd be easy. So as you can see, seniors and the older demographic, they struggled a bit. Students, you'd think they'd be more tech savvy. It was kind of balanced of how they reacted to working in this. And of course, technology, it's changed even in the last year since we've developed this about how easy it is to load these videos into the headset. First, we had to go to YouTube and stream it, and then we were able to load them directly on through the Oculus app through the headset, and that was nicer, so it was a more slick experience, and as a result, the quality improved. So here is a little bit of footage of some of this business-age demographic filling out their surveys. The best was seeing them spin around in those chairs. And so making sure that they had enough space between each of them was really important, because once in a while they'd crash and be like, oh, what are you doing? And they'd forget that they were in the room. And so we'd make sure that we wouldn't move as facilitators to knock into them. There's a wind turbine one we have at the college too, and once in a while the instructors kind of tap them on the shoulder because they get to stand on the top of this wind turbine at 80 meters in the air. See if they're scared of heights or not. It's kind of cruel, but it's also kind of fun. So then looking at the connection to content, was it meaningful to the users? And you can see it's kind of balanced at the student and business demographic, and then seniors, not so much. They had more negative experiences than positive. So again, talking about who is the right demographic for this content, and if we're looking and we're missing that demographic, looking at those Ipsos reads and the kind of material that we saw yesterday in those presentations, that key younger demographic, this may be one of those holy grails for getting younger people to pay attention and care more about the news they consume. We certainly hope so. And did they get the real intent of the piece? Again, the technology, or maybe they didn't really get the point of what the story was about, because in these headsets, again, you can't focus people where to control or where to look. They have that total freedom. So they could be looking in the back corner, maybe at what time the clock said, and that was one of the comments one of the students said. I was looking at the clock. He was like a Pulp Fiction fan, seeing if he could figure out the story himself. And for some reason, he was fixated on the clocks through all the different acts or scenes in the piece. But sometimes the distraction and getting the real intent of the story across. So there's little tricks and things you can do, like picture-in-picture, like having an actual rectangular picture of your content within the 360 experience may focus them. Matt Wright with Mammoth VR, he's actually had arrows which direct people to the content. And so that's helped. This is the best. Okay, so for the seniors, we had two groups again. And what was really interesting is that they appreciated the content, and they thought that they got a better understanding of how paramedics work, and they actually cared about what was going on in the environment. George says it reminds him of the Muppets with these two guys. But just amazing watching them experience this, and something they've never experienced before. And look at this. Hearing aids, they'd take them out, put them on the table. George is like, get that shot. And just how they were going through this and experiencing it. There was a piece that I think was made across Canada in the last month or two, talking about people in palliative care who have never traveled or would like to travel to see something, and going into these 360 experiences and just being like, blown away, and just the most amazing smile on their faces afterwards, after being able to travel halfway around the world, and if they're bedridden or something like that. So there is so much potential for different industries, and it's very exciting. So that freedom of control, students liked it. The business demographic, they liked it as well, but the seniors are like, no, tell me what to look at. I'm used to my television. Tell me where to look. I want my close-ups. I want my sequences. Get me the story. And sometimes, again, that leads to the distraction or missing the intent of the story. Do I care about participants in the story? I guess students have no feelings. It was just, we used keywords from some of the conversations, and they didn't talk about this empathy piece. It's not that they're uncaring individuals. We're not blaming the millennials for everything. So, again, empathy. The seniors and business people both cared about the people in the story, got a better understanding of what happens in an emergency situation and how it unfolds. Again, the storytelling piece, they liked the medium, it worked. And look at that, seniors, very positive. So a lot of, and I could stand up here the next hour and a half and talk about this, but some snapshots of what we did. So and then the students. After we finished the focus groups, we went on and we did 5 projects over the course of this winter semester, from January till April. And at that time, we took different things into consideration. So there's content, video, audio, editing, and user experience. And if anybody's interested, I can provide this full PowerPoint to you or anything like that. I originally thought I was speaking for an hour, so yesterday I was furious, like, oh my God, I got to make this down to 30 minutes. So there's a lot more material here. So for content considerations, here was one. Stephanie Savage again. Front of the college. So as you can see, when it's stretched over something like this, when you're looking at it, it's equirectangular. And so much different when you're in the headset, obviously, because it's just wrapped all around you. And it's about choosing the right environment. And to keep somebody engaged in this story, you need to first orient them to the scene. So like 10 seconds is not unrealistic to keep your audience fixed on one scene, much longer than a typical television story. So you need something for people to experience and explore in each of those scenes, or they're going to get bored. And so that could be audio or visual cues. But remember, there's no more close-ups, so you can't direct people where to look. And it's kind of like this exploration, choose your own adventure, that you have to think about and how the narration might guide the viewer. This is one from our open house at the college. So you can see sometimes if the participants are standing too close to the camera, you get that kind of feeling of distortion. A lot of it gets solved once you put on the headset. So for editing and post-production, what students would do a lot is just put that headset back on with the headset or with the earphones to make sure then that their audio and everything was intended as they wanted. There was one scene once of graffiti, and it had a really offensive word right in front of them, and they didn't realize that it popped out like that until they put the virtual reality headset on. So again, those considerations for content. The camera placement and neutrality. So again, either the height of the camera to make sure that you're the typical height, or you have that weird feeling that you're taller than you actually are, or smaller. It has everything to do with power, depending on how you place that camera. A lot more planning is needed to actually get that camera where you want it. So for sporting events and how restrictive they are for access, you need to plan it out a little bit more. And you need to shoot enough locations to limit those jump cuts. So to have a reporter in the scene in every shot doesn't make sense, because then they're popping out of nowhere, and it's distracting. So knowing when to have your stand-up at the beginning or the end, and then even to have them narrate the rest of the sequence or the rest of the story makes sense. Technical considerations, poor light are challenging, just like any shot, as well as with this 360 camera, as you can see here, that's 280-degree lenses that are back-to-back on this camera. And so in between there, right where the menu and power button are on these cameras, that's where your stitch line is. And so that's where you get some weird things happening with your distortion. And you can see here in that image, let's see if that works. Right there along that line is the stitch line. And so you have to be careful about where you place that. And depending on where you want your audience to be looking, you can then rotate that camera appropriately to eliminate that stitch line being right in the middle of somebody's face, for example. Here's another one. This is in our aquaculture area, and you can see how his left hand is kind of distorted. It's right along that seam line. Again, as I mentioned, just to make sure that you test watch your video in one of these head-mounted displays. That's just a fancy acronym. And then the ethical considerations to make sure that you put a warning at the front of something if you're covering a war, if you're covering some event that's very, either intense or offensive to viewers, to make sure that you have something like this to kick off your piece is very important. And this is right in the Lethbridge, Global Lethbridge Studios. One of our students here, David Sellis, is interviewing Liam. And what was funny during this piece is that a little dog ran in through the newsroom. And when people were watching the content, they're like, squirrel, and they're looking down like, oh, it's a cute little puppy. So again, making sure that you're very considerate of the type of what's in your scene. If it's distracting garbage cans or things like that, or if you have a dog running through your scene, that people are going to miss the intent of your story. Having those bright windows in a darker scene, obviously that doesn't work so well. Finding that seam line again. And then give people at least 3 walls to look at or explore. Don't put that camera into a corner, because that's going to be frustrating to the viewer. When it comes to interviews, so getting people to face kind of at a 45-degree angle, talking to each other is best. So that was really interesting. And then getting them to talk about the environment that they're in, kind of like when you're doing a tourism video or something like that, to explain the surroundings, so then the viewer can explore it and understand and where the narration is going and where it wants to lead them. Weather, so they're water resistant, so no swimming. Wind remains an issue, and in Lethbridge, it's always an issue, so keep that in mind. Shooting in cold weather is fine. So the biggest issue with these cameras is that they overheat in 20 minutes. And so that's really frustrating. Battery technology will hopefully improve. The GoPro Fusion is kind of the next phase, and I'll show you a bunch of different things if I can in the next 5 minutes. Hot weather is a challenge. So when we were shooting that mock disaster, we kept on throwing the batteries into the freezer between shots so they'd cool off so that they'd be ready to go for another 20 minutes of shooting. So there on the left, Samsung. On the right is the GoPro Fusion. Again, this idea of camera height. So if you're doing a story about children, obviously get your FOIP first, but then making sure that your camera height is at their level, or else you have that weird feeling that you're just towering over these people. And it's kind of like when you're sitting in a cop car and they walk up to you, give you a ticket for the first time. They just unnerving. And one student did a piece on an auto hoist. So they're like in an auto shop or whatever, and it comes down. And she was actually in tears when she saw that coming down because she thought it was going to crush her. It's like, it's just in your experience. So just making sure that you keep that in mind. Any objects, any people, it's a sign of power, whether positive or negative. So Zoom H2N, they have a patch for these spatial audio considerations, and then Sennheiser, fancy mics, if you want to pick up more of that ambient sound, it's just a more expensive option. Editing challenges, again, have that variety and quantity of different scenes. And your transitions, obviously you don't want to have something spiraling out because then people are just going to get nauseous and want to rip this thing off. I remember the first time I watched a roller coaster in a virtual reality headset, I almost wanted to puke. So be very careful of the type of transitions you have. Again, it's this weird expanded length of time that you keep viewers in one scene that's not like traditional television. Graphics, so what's interesting, you don't put them down at the lower third like you traditionally do. You actually find a way to put them more in the middle, and there's templates in this editing software that we have with Adobe Premiere and Final Cut Pro to really make it easier for those things. And so the students were experimenting with that and where to place those graphics to identify who they are interviewing. And once in a while, you had stitching issues. So that was very frustrating. What students would do then is simply take it back to the drawing board and then push it through from the phone again into the camera. And usually that would solve the issue. You get some of these weird spots showing up. 10 feet is the ideal distance. And this one's interesting. So Jessica Brillhart in Medium in 2016, she said that it's so important to have from your first shot here to your next shot, have what they should be focused on in that same area or line of sight, because if you don't want them spinning around in the whole experience because they're either going to get motion sickness or just not have a good experience watching your story. So lining up those shots from first to second to third, making sure those all line up. So I don't know, is anybody doing 360 storytelling in this room? Oh, great. And who are you with? Okay, great. So Highway of Tears or the Halifax disaster?
I put a 360 camera underwater at Hodgson reception.
Yeah.
Got the beaver.
Yeah.
So you got to see them shipping through the ice above and then below, and to see the beaver getting fed.
Yeah.
Fed with water.
Okay, great. Does anybody know if they will be allocating resources to this in the next 2 years? I had like 12 of these questions. Great, good. So that's good to see. Next level for 360-degree videos is actually in YouTube. There's actually heat maps so you can identify where people are looking in this 360 experience. And so that's kind of the next thing that's coming. We're excited about how that unfolds. So if anybody's been to Lethbridge College, we welcome you anytime for a tour. It's our brand new Trades and Technology Innovation Facility. We now have this innovation space within there, which is great. And we definitely can tour you through that. So we have a brand new dean who came out from Dalhousie, and so he's been very encouraging about this work we are doing and pushing us along the way. So that's been great. Here's an example. In this innovation space, we have opportunity to see 4 different things. So when people are in the headset, we can actually see what they're seeing. And so you get that really good understanding of how people are understanding the content. And that split camera really helps to get that greater comprehension. At one point here, we'll transition into the to the newsroom at Global, but because of time, I'm just going to go. So this is the range of cameras. So low end, the Ricoh Theta. We thought about this one, but then we saw that it wasn't getting favorable reviews, so we started with the Samsung. And their second phase was actually worse than their first because it provided image stabilization, and that was very frustrating and not favorable. The GoPro Fusion. So here's some mid-range cameras. The Yi at $530, the Garmin $1,100. And then you can start looking at the InstaPro 360, and actually we have one of these. This crazy Sputnik-looking thing. And then Google Jump has those Yi cameras, about 16 of them wrapped around. Samsung has this new version of something much more impressive than the camera that we were using, and that's this Jaunt, $94,000. So I'm sure we have the budgets for these monsters. So again, we always welcome partners to work with us, and so if you have any interest of working with us here at the college, we'd definitely be happy about that. And we're looking at tackling a lot of different initiatives going forward. So we'll have non-credit virtual reality training happening in the fall and more to come after that. So come check it out. Multimedia production, real quick. I'll stop really quick here. But we're creating virtual reality games. And also with interior design, you can actually create your dream home with all your dream furniture and the color of your cabinets and how much light comes in through a room. And you can choose the environmental efficiency of your house. We're doing that for interior design as well. So again, many, many different things being tackled. So thank you so much for your time. Hopefully that was enjoyable.
So, Kris, you're going to be around for a while. I'm sure there's tons of questions people have, and there's a whole bunch more that you can show them. And now we're going to have lunch. But what I want you to do is grab your lunch, come on back, because we're going to have our keynote today, The View from Down South, a conversation about challenges journalists face covering the Trump era, the RTDNA First Amendment Initiative, Trust, and local news, with Dan Shelley, Executive Director for RTDNA USA, and Scott Libben, Chair